Andrew Dominic, the director of Blonde, the Marilyn Monroe biopic that released on Netflix recently, he had to come to the defense of his movie because it was accused of having an anti-choice sentiment.
Which means nothing.
Plot.
That makes no sense.
Meaning it seemed critical of abortion to viewers.
And you can't do that anymore.
Now, people had other issues with the movie that I also understand. They said that it seemed like it was more about Ana de Armas than about Marilyn Monroe, and that it was...
Meaning the way it was shot.
It was shot to emphasize her body and have excessive nudity and sexual scenes.
They felt that the director was exploitative of her physique.
Yeah, and they said that it made Marilyn Monroe seem like too much of a victim and not really focused on her personality. But this is ultimately based on a novel and not meant to be a historical, accurate retelling of her life. Which is why he took liberties.
And I want to point out that before we get into it, that's very dangerous territory we're in right now.
Yeah.
Where dramatizations of real people's lives are then turned into movies.
Same situation with The Woman King.
Yeah.
Like, people will take that as historical fact.
The farther you get away from, because it's within their right as creatives to make something like that. If you're inspired by a person and you write a book about somebody that inspired you, and you take liberties, but people on the outset when you write that book know that that's what that is.
Like Abraham Lincoln fighting vampires.
Yeah, I mean that's a very extreme example, but yeah, like so it's like, but the ones that don't stray into sci-fi, right? They just change the story with Ana de Armas in Blonde with Marilyn Monroe. It's there's a lot of the sexualization. They make it a lot about her victimization of the industry, and they focus on certain aspects of her life. Now, what I'm just saying is that we're getting into a dangerous territory where it's kind of like a game of telephone. It's like the farther you get away from the actual story, the easier it is to obfuscate what actually happened in their lives.
Yeah, you can make a movie about George Washington, like torturing and murdering a guy.
Yeah, and like it's a dramatization, but then enough generations go by, and they start to take that dramatization as the factual events of what happened in their life. I think that's a very dangerous precedent to set.
Yeah, but again, like, things can be manipulated in all sorts of ways, including in history books. So you can't control the fact that, like, stupid people will watch Blonde and think that that's exactly what happened in Marilyn Monroe's life.
The famous picture of like the white guy is the Egyptian pharaoh in like every like history book.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just get ignorant people watching, and they might be brilliantly intelligent, and the problem with brilliant intelligence and ignorance when they're put together is you really believe what you think is real is real.
And you come up with the best ways to rationalize your beliefs. But anyway, Blonde, it portrayed Marilyn Monroe being haunted by the fetus that her unborn fetus that it says she aborted. Now, it's not known whether or not Marilyn Monroe ever got an abortion. She is known to have had 3 miscarriages in her marriage to, what is his name? Arthur Miller. Mm-hmm. And it's never confirmed that she's had an abortion in her life. But this filmmaker and this novel took the liberty of assuming that one of those miscarriages was actually an abortion and that she was haunted by the guilt after getting that abortion. And there was a notoriously graphic scene in this movie that was like a POV shot of her abortion. Now, I haven't seen that. I've only seen, we both have seen a part of the movie where she is clipping roses in her garden. And she hears the voice of her unborn fetus in that scene speaking to her. It's her second baby, asking, like, are you going to do the same thing you did to... Like, are you going to abort me too, basically? Yeah. And it just shows her struggling with the guilt of that. So, and I think that's a very realistic depiction, right, of a lot of women who get abortions and then regret it afterwards.
There's a big push in Hollywood to make it seem like it's not something that you should feel any regret for, that you should not feel any guilt over. And the sad fact is it's
telling people how to feel.
The statistics don't tell us that there's a large amount of people, of women that feel a great amount of guilt or if not guilt, sadness, because they don't expect it to affect them the way that it does.
Yeah, so the supposed reason that she got this abortion in the film is because she thought that her mother's mental illness was hereditary and she didn't want to pass it on to her children. That's a very dark thing to explore in the film, but like obviously that's what he was going for. he got backlash because you aren't apparently you aren't allowed to portray anything negative about abortion in film anymore, even if it's about the woman's experience.
You have to evangelize it.
Yeah,
it
exactly.
Seem like the greatest thing ever.
So he had to respond to this backlash, saying, "I don't think the movie is anti-pro-choice. I don't think it is at all. And I'm not convinced that she actually wants to have a baby. I think she has feelings about not having a baby. I'm not convinced that what she's doing, she doesn't end up having one. There's a wish for a baby, but there's a fear of the baby. And I think that's kind of the central stressor on her." He continued, "I think sort of this desire to look at Blonde through a Roe v. Wade lens is everybody else doing the same thing. They've got a certain agenda where they feel like the freedoms of women are being compromised, and they look at Blonde and they see a demon, but it's not really about that. I think it's very difficult for people to step out of the stories they carry inside themselves and see things of their own volition. And I think that's really what the movie is about, the dangers of that."
I feel like he wants the movie to transcend the time period that it lives in. And that this movie should stand on its own, even if Roe v. Wade hadn't been overturned and you were still able to look at it. He doesn't want you to see this movie as a snapshot in time. And this is kind of the thing that happened with when the first episode of House of the Dragon came out. There's a very graphic scene of a baby dying in childbirth and a mother dying in childbirth. And they're like, this was our commentary on Roe v. Wade, which anybody who has a half a brain understands that is bullshit, because the show had to be filmed far in advance of when that ruling was actually made. They're just saying that to curry favor with the public that happens to be angry about that in this moment.
And it's disrespectful to the people who've actually experienced it.
Exactly. So it feels like what he wants is for this movie to live on its own outside of the realms of whatever the politics are of 2022.
Yeah, so that's why he pointed out he doesn't think that this film would have received the same backlash if he made it 5 years ago.
No, it wouldn't
But
have.
he also doesn't think it would have been as relevant then. He said that if he had made this movie in 2008, no one's going to care about it, or no one would care about it in 2008, and no one would care about it in 4 years' time from now.
Well, I don't know if nobody would, that's almost he's doing the movie a disservice saying that.
Exactly.
If
and
your
I don't
movie
think
only survives because you just happen to get lucky,
No.
and in a topical issue just happened to coincide with your release. First of all, you're disrespecting the source material. You're saying that the book that you adapted wasn't strong enough to live on its own. You're disrespecting Marilyn Monroe's influence on culture and society, which anybody that's hung out with a basic 20-year-old white woman knows that they're just about every one of them has a poster of Marilyn Monroe in their very first apartment. You're doing her cultural relevance and significance a disservice. You're kind of insulting a lot of people by saying that.
Do they
Yeah.
does her family or her estate sue if she's misrepresented? How does that work?
Well, this is based on a book, so they wouldn't even be able to.
Oh, so they probably sold the rights. They probably okayed the book at some point.
Yeah, so this is completely allowed. And I mean, I think it's rather... I mean, I think it's distasteful to show it. I won't...
The abortion?
Yeah, that, and really, I've heard, disturbing things about the whole movie.
Well, can I ask you a question? It's not off topic, but, we've talked about, at the March for Life, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they have the videos of abortions.
Yeah.
And you were hesitant to show that, even though you could argue that the shocking imagery that gives the public could help
the
further their
motivation
cause.
that people have, the motivation pro-life people at the march have behind showing that footage in front of everyone is that they want our society to confront
The horror
exactly what it is doing.
Yeah.
I understand that, but also there are children there, and everyone there is already on the same page about the horror of the procedure. So you're not actually making any ignorant people confront what that is.
I mean, they put him on a big enough screen that it's possible.
And
that
also that's a
people-
person.
Yes.
And that's somebody's womb that you're showing
Yeah.
to thousands of people walking on the street.
Yeah.
That's not cool.
Yeah.
To say the least. I don't think that's okay.
I think the same with military conflict. If we had helmet cams on the soldiers, so when someone gets shot, you watch them bleed out, or you see the horror of death on the field, or factory farming when you see the animals getting their bolts put into their head and their throats cut. But like you said, kids, you don't want to warp kids' minds to try and get a political point made. but adults, consenting adults, I think that footage is important for people to be able to see.
Sure. Yeah, but I mean, I think a lot of people clicked on this movie not thinking about it, and then they saw just like really awful, dark stuff.
Yeah.
And didn't expect it because Marilyn Monroe is remembered so fondly and as this like paragon of femininity and softness and happiness.
Does it feel like
her life was like really dark and like full of suffering?
Do you think that that's like it just furthers the trend that we're seeing where we're looking at everything that was important to Americana and we're tearing it down little by little with
That's got to be
documentaries?
part of it, right?
I was watching we're not going to talk about it because it's not out yet, but there's a documentary being made about Barney and about the violence that the idea of Barney has inspired in people.
The purple dinosaur?
The purple dinosaur, where he gets vile messages about people wanting, like people see Barney and are just filled with this innate desire to hurt him.
Really?
Yes.
That's got to be something more.
Like it's like and the funny thing is,
I hated that show when I was a kid. My younger brother used to watch it. I'd be like, "What is this stupid, mind-melting crap?"
You don't even know why, but for something like, and I had a friend who posted like a video yesterday, had nothing to do with the documentary, just saying it was like a picture of Barney because I remember how much I hated.
It was like
Barney.
Teletubbies version 1, and then the Tubbies appeared.
What?
So we
okay, but like Barney isn't exactly a like cultural touchstone for all
Kind of.
Americans, is he?
Kind of.
In 1993,
In the 90s,
it was
yeah.
like, or 90, it was like, why is this real?
But
why is he like, why is he talking like this? I'm like, dude, just give him a normal voice at least.
Okay, then put it this way: if you hear the name Barney, is it not is a giant purple dinosaur not going to be the very first thing that almost every Barney Fife was a thing?
There was a Barnaby before. He had that show in like 84 or something. He was that old dude. He was like around the 70s too. He looked like a captain on a boat.
But the point here is just that we as a culture, at least Hollywood, seems to be obsessed in recent years with finding things that seemed important to Americans, cultural touchstones, the things that brought us together as a nation, and systematically tearing them down from the inside and showing the worst aspects of them so that they can show you and say, look back and say, hey, it wasn't all that great, was it? Like, you hear that a lot. They're like, oh, America, it wasn't all that great. America was never great. Whoever I don't remember who that crappy politician was who said that. But, like, they want to take back and show you everything that you loved, everything that held this country together on a cultural level, and they want to tear it down.
Yeah.
You could make the argument that for the director, it's an individual project. That's what they care about. They don't care about tearing down the culture.
Right.
But they're interested in that story.
It's part of a greater trend.
Exactly. And that bothers me. Like, I mean, I'm not here to stop them from making their art, but I am wondering why there's so much financial backing for that type of project from the inside. I wouldn't be surprised if you found out years later that tinfoil hat, you find out that most of those films are financed by like Tencent or like Chinese production companies or Russian production companies to just propagandize Americans into thinking you didn't have it all that great. Your country isn't worth fighting for. Your country isn't all that special.
Yeah, there's a balance because there was a lot of American propaganda growing up for sure. Like telling me America's the greatest, we're the good guys, they were the bad guys. And like, yeah, sometimes. And the U.S. Constitution is legit, but there's a lot of nasty stuff. Like the Native American slaughter is like one of the most horrific things perpetrated on North America in the last in recorded history.
Well, there's sort of been a dishonest reframing of patriotism that it's...
Thank you.
That patriotism and wanting to see that reflected in media is a complete denial of anything wrong that has happened in this country when it never has been.
You can celebrate Thanksgiving without saying that you're celebrating the death of Native Americans.
Yeah, think about what Marilyn Monroe represents to this day, what she always has represented. It's, well, really like femininity, mystique, sexiness
Then
in a time when
trying to tear down?
Yeah, in a time that they claim is so puritanical, she was a sex symbol.
Or else
there's also like a great actor in the
and
in the 50s,
a great
like
performer, multi-talented performer,
and a woman at that time, which was like challenging to break. She kind of broke the mold and brought the women's the second wave feminism to a front. Like she was like a powerful force of femininity,
but at the same time was like very warm and charming, and.
Which, as Mary
knows,
knows,
everything that isn't allowed
nowadays
to be portrayed in film nowadays. So you have to show what her life was like in the most over dramatized, hyperbolic, every low point they want to take from her life, fictionalize it, dramatize it, and make it more horrific than it even might have been in real life.
Yeah.
They just want to like tear her down as an icon.
I guess the balance is you do want to wake people up to the horror of atrocity that the United States has been involved in, but also you got to remind people that the U.S. Constitution liberation from the monarchy of England is like one of the greatest. I mean, the French immediately reciprocated and overthrew their like French American alliance. Like, it's so important that we maintain these values of freedom, democracy, republicanism, American constitutionalism, but at the same time, acknowledge the crap.
Yep. Well, that's I actually get into. It's not a debate, but I have this kind of weird predilection to fight with people. I don't anymore, but I used to be more likely to fight with people or argue with people about this stuff. That it's not pointing out the flaws does not make you inherently anti anything. But I found that most of the people that do focus on pointing out the flaws are very much that. And I don't think that that's what we are anymore. I think your average person that wants to celebrate the 4th of July and wears a shirt with an American flag on it isn't saying they want to support the government slaughtering a bunch of people overseas or that they believe in drone strikes. Supporting the people and the citizenry and the shared core values of your country isn't the same thing as supporting the government.
Yeah, like watching Top Gun Maverick and loving that film for what it was, and it meaning something to you, thank you, is not mutually exclusive with like not wanting needless war.
Also, other countries aren't doing this. We are a unique country in that our country has an extreme desire to hate itself right now.
Yeah, and
that
I think
is
that's
very unique to us.
I think that's being perpetrated from Hollywood.
Yes. Oh yeah. 110%.
And like obviously Marilyn Monroe was not a political figure, but
JFK.
Because she represents sort of classical Americana.
Yeah. Well, there was
and also, you know, a quintessential like American woman.
Powerful feminist.
Then
before feminism, I mean.
Yeah, when you were allowed to be a woman.
When
and
it was
a
cool,
yeah.
like when it was like, yo, feminism is equal rights for men and women together. Like that's what the point of this is.
But you said she was warm and that she had all these traits of being an actual feminine woman that are not in any way exalted in Hollywood anymore. A woman in Hollywood now is just a lighter version of a man.
Yeah, so like the reasons that people loved her are now the exact reasons she is being torn down with a fictionalized movie like this. It's about taking away her dignity. Like, truly, that's why I was disturbed by it. It's not because I, like, want to impose puritanical standards onto Hollywood and what can be shown. It's because it seemed intent on showing the most sordid things that she ever experienced, but also making up things about her life that we don't even know happened. The JFK affair, scandal, rumor, whatever you want to call it, that is played into so much and like mythologized so heavily. Yeah. And then this abortion that we don't even know whether or not she had one.
And I want to actually talk a little bit about how the idea that you're not allowed to not be, you can only be the most fervent of pro-choice, not even pro-choice anymore. You have to be pro-abortion.
Yeah, if you don't show Marilyn Monroe not only getting an abortion, but showing that she had 3 abortions in a row and she loved every minute of it.
And she threw a party after everyone.
And threw a party after each one. You're anti-choice.
So this is a quote from Diablo Cody, who wrote Juno.
Okay.
She says, reflected on her 2007 dramedy featuring a teen pregnancy and adoption journey, she says, "I am emphatically pro-choice and have been my entire life. It is important to me to make that clear," Cody told The Hollywood Reporter. "But I can understand why people would misunderstand that movie. The movie, looking back on it, I can see how it would be perceived as anti-choice, and that horrifies me." So just by showing that another option even existed, remember that's the choice option in pro-choice. People believe that just by showing another option at all makes her anti the option that they're not showing.
Yeah,
that's
no
insane.
Possibility for nuance.
That's insane. It's like saying, okay, what would be a good example of that?
If you're like, I'm gonna go skating, I'm like, well, then you hate cooking.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically the same thing. It's absolutely bonkers, but that's the industry that they work in. So. Do you think they would have been better off making an actual documentary and trying to be even-handed, or
there have been so many documentaries about her already? It's like, what hasn't been said?
And let's face it, people love these days, it does feel like people love the absolute over-the-top stuff. Like, I guarantee you at least one person walked away from that Anne Boleyn thing and actually believed that Anne Boleyn was black. Like that's a thing. There's at least one person who believed that.
And because the things portrayed in this in Blonde aren't actually that outlandish, then there are a lot of people who are gonna watch it and take it as facts, and I feel defamatory.
That scares the crap out of me.
Like that's defamatory.
It breaks my heart for her, like for her and her family and her legacy, and it breaks my heart for like what that's going to do to our future as harsh retellings and dramatizations of all the things that made us who we are become fact in lieu of actual.
Dude, they could do it to Bruce Willis too. They can make, if they have his likeness, they can tell stories about his past. Entertainment now is teaching history.
Yeah.
You know, and so maybe there should be some rules and restrictions. I don't know. I'm not. I don't like throwing it at the government and be like, fix it. You know?
As soon as we get to that's the problem, right? It's like we have this discussion, and as soon as you get to the idea of like maybe we should impose law, like, well, who's imposing the laws?
That's where I get trigger happy.
Mary gets very excited about getting
decency laws now.
And whereas I am more like, maybe I don't want to give a bunch of scumbags in government the power.
Yeah, we got to police it ourselves.
Yeah,
which is what we're doing right now by talking about it.
Yeah.
We're at least setting the groundwork for a self. You know,
and I don't have any plans of streaming Blonde because I think it's just gross.
Do I actually want like whoever? And I don't care political party, right? Like I don't want any more a bunch of Republicans having a right to make those decisions than I want a bunch of Democrats having the right to make those decisions about what's allowed and what isn't allowed.
Video games, man. I'm still waiting for them to put Hitler in one of the Civilization games.
Think
like
so?
They just have refused to do it for 6.
Really?
Yeah, for like 20 years they won't use Hitler. They haven't used Hitler. It's so weird. The way that they're like afraid.
Too many
evil.
possibilities to get backlash.
Do they use other?
They had Stalin one time.
Stalin,
just
Mao?
one time. I think they had Mao one time.
Okay.
And then, but no Hitler. Like, what kind of history are they trying to teach? Like that Frederick the First was the greatest German leader. I mean, Hitler was super evil, but evil people can be considered great. Genghis Khan.
I was going to say
Alexander the Great.
It's like
murder.
A guy named Bittler.
Yeah, really. But anyway, I'm just kind of. Basically, like Civ is teaching history. Like the way that they teach the way cultures were in that game is the way people think cultures were. So
now sci-fi teaches the future.
That is terrifying. That should be terrifying. If you want a lighthearted way of looking at something like this in sci-fi, there was a show called Warehouse 13, which I've mentioned many times, which it's a show where they find magical artifacts and they have to like find them and lock them away because they have magical properties that can be misused. And the idea is that for every great invention or all these moments in history where something extraordinary happened, magic is created from the completion of that act. So like the plane that the Wright brothers got up in the air is imbued with magical properties, or an aspect of that plane is imbued with magical properties. And it actually gives a kind of lighthearted and a wholesome look back at a lot of history through a science fiction and fantasy lens. Thanks for watching this clip, guys. If you want to see full episodes or follow us on social media, links are in the description below. Bye.